Well, welcome to another session of Black History Conversations, and I'm delighted that today we've got David Weiner with us. David's a former amateur racing cyclist, and he's going to tell us the story and the challenges of a fantastic black superstar called Major Taylor, a cyclist. So that'll be just fascinating. So then we're going to continue with updates about Black history and the things that people have been sending in this week, which is great. So I just say, because I'm here in Australia, that I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm living, the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nation, their elders past, present, and the current generation. This land belongs to the sovereign people of our First Nations, and it was never ceded. It always was, and it always will be. Right, so I've done a little bit of an introduction here, just to remind me, and also to share some links, and I can share these links with you, or if you can do cut and pastes, and that's fine. Central Bylines did a really great article. Well, you did it, David, didn't you? About Major Taylor, and gave some of his background, but you're going to be telling us all about that. What we do with these PowerPoints is, though, we've got information that we can share with other people. Then I discovered about the Major Taylor Association, formed in 1998 in Worcester, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of interesting work going on there about Black history stories. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Welcome everyone. It's great to have my colleagues David Alston from Scotland, Simon Fringo from Nottingham, from Belong Nottingham, Caroline Sansom from Learning Links International, Helen Papworth, who's a great author and great supporter of these programs, which we've done about 50 odd sessions now. It's amazing. And welcoming two guests as well today. Welcome to you all. Right, okay then, David. So tell us about Major Taylor. We're just fascinated to know more about him and why he's so special to you and to so many other people.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you very much for the invitation, and also to Simon. Major Taylor, as a cyclist, Major Taylor is somebody, a name I've been aware of for many, many years, but never really knew the story. And basically what happened, the Commonwealth Games are coming to Birmingham this year. And the bid was confirmed in 2017. And straight away, I thought, blimey, this is great. We, at long last, Birmingham and the West Midlands will get a modern indoor velodrome. Basically, a 250-metre wooden track, 42-degree bankings at each end, rather like the velodrome in London, Lee Valley, Manchester, which has become known as the Medal Factory. So I thought this is wonderful because we've wanted a velodrome in the second city since, well, my time in sort of Hell's Own Cycling Club, 1976. I can remember somebody coming to the club, chairman of the Westminster Sports Council, a guy called Jim Sadler, and he said, I can announce tonight we're going to build the first indoor velodrome in the United Kingdom. It's going to be in Sandwell. But of course, here we are now, 2022, no velodrome. So I started a campaign to get one built. And part of the campaign, I researched cycling and the history and came upon this name, Major Taylor. And the more I looked at Major Taylor, the more fascinating the story became. I looked at Major from the point of view, coming from a cycling point of view, as a rider, an incredibly talented rider who became world cycling champion on the track 1899 in Montreal. But then the more the story unfolded, and it became very relevant with the horrible incident in America where the gentleman was killed in a police arrest. and so the Black Lives Matter was very, very prominent in the media. So the story of Major Taylor became even more important. So I think at the moment, if I can ask Simon to show the video of Major, this is an advert done by Hennessy, and it shows Major on a 6-day track. I think it's the one at Madison Square Garden. Over to you, Simon.
Yep. And it looks as though Major Taylor is making a go for it. He's working hard, passing men on the outside, down the red line, coming up on Burns. He's really stepping on it. Taylor pushing, Burns fading. There's literally, oh, and he's down! Burns hits the deck, and Taylor breaks him. The world champion, Marshall Major Taylor.
Thank you, Simon.
Brilliant.
So that clip's fantastic, and obviously Hennessy have done a marvelous job there. I think they've done similar adverts, and it's great to see a big company like that taking on this incredible responsibility of getting a great story out about Major as a black athlete who became a world champion when track cycling in North America and in Europe and Australia was the #1 sport. It was incredibly popular. So we go back to the campaign for the velodrome, and Simon, if we can refer please to the addendum documents, we should go to page 2, Danny Kahn. So Danny, thank you, Simon. Danny is the face of the campaign. She's a young cyclist who became very successful. She came from Solihull. Now, people don't know Solihull. It's quite a wealthy area of the West Midlands. And Danny was a talented skater. Then she became a cyclist. And she was very fortunate because Mum and Dad had the ability to drive Danny, like many parents do, many miles to go to training venues, whatever sport it might be. It might be tennis, might be swimming, whatever sport. So the nearest track for Danny to go to was actually the only track in the UK, and that was Manchester Velodrome. So Danny had a lot of talent, but she needed a venue to train in, or I say to train in, and that's an indoor velodrome. Of course, the West Midlands doesn't have a track. So anyway, Danny is a star. She's put a name to the campaign, and she's the face of our campaign. Okay, we can go to the next page, please, Simon. So part of the aim of the velodrome is to not only have cycling on the track, but to cater for any manner of indoor sport within the track centre. So the track will be 250 metres, and that gives you a tremendous area of floor space for any sport. So as an example, the track in Newport is a 250-metre track, and I've been down there, paid £10 for a 2-hour coached session on the track, and I've seen 5 sports all going on at the same time. It's been, the popular sports would be badminton, five-a-side football, tennis, but you could do boxing, judo, boccia, which is a disability sport for people in a wheelchair. That's what makes the velodrome really, really a flexible venue. So Tanny Gray Thompson, she's a brilliant sports person. She obviously competes in wheelchair sports, or did compete in wheelchair sports. I contacted Tanny because she's highly respected as a campaigner for disability. And we spoke on the phone about how, if we have a velodrome, how can we ensure access for people in wheelchairs? Because believe it or not, track cycling lends itself to people with missing limbs, artificial legs and arms, and actually lends itself to people with sight impairment. So think of a tandem, somebody on the back of the tandem, maybe blind, totally blind, or partly sighted. That's an activity that a person who suffers from sight impairments can do almost on equal terms as a sighted person. And we've got a page on the documents, which I say, just imagine the guts it takes to ride on the back of a tandem at over 40 miles an hour on an indoor track. So Tanny was wonderful. I introduced Tanny to the governing body, and we had a meeting with the governing body and a research company who are looking into putting together a technical review called Affordable Velodromes. And that's where Tanny fits in. So she's the star, and hopefully when the velodrome's opened, maybe she'll open it. So page 8, please, Simon, the concept. So the idea is a low cost, value for money, multi-sport community velodrome. The cycling would cater for the people of the West Midlands, so people would be happy to travel maybe 35, 40 miles. That would be considered a sort of a doable distance. The venue, the track centre would be for community sports. So whatever sport the local community are particularly interested in. It's a centre of sport. That's the conventional aspect of cycling, competitive cycling, fitness, health and well-being. So it's cycling for everybody and sport for everybody, not just champions, but people of all ages to go to the velodrome and have a good workout and have a good chit chat at the end over a cup of coffee. And the important thing is making indoor track cycling accessible and inclusive. So cycling, my time in cycling since 1968-ish, it never really occurred to me in my younger days that cycling seems to be a sport done by white people. Very, very few black people took to cycling. There were one or two exceptional people, like Maurice Burton became a very good professional rider and a 6-day rider. And just a pocket of black people and maybe a few Asian people. But primarily it's a white sport, and that's what we need to change. So the idea of the velodrome is to make track cycling accessible. So you've got people from poorer communities, children who can't afford a bike, but maybe their school will say, we'll go to the velodrome and don't worry about having a bicycle, because the velodrome have bikes. They've got helmets like Derby, they've got shoes like Derby, cycling shoes. So that's basically the concept of what we're aiming for. And we're talking about the idea of a lower cost velodrome for maybe sort of £6 to £7 million compared with the velodrome in London, which costs about £90 million. Okay, we can go to page 9, please, Simon. Just a mention of John Crabtree. John Crabtree is the chairman of the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee. He's an incredible person. He's the Lord Lieutenant of the West Midlands. And he actually went public and said that if he was a cyclist disappointed about the lack of a velodrome, he would make a noise, he would lobby and make a noise. So the lack of the velodrome is never down to the organisers. That was made by other people. So that's the sort of backup we've got. Page 10, please, Simon. This is I don't think we've got time, Liz. I'm not sure if we could play the interview of Hughie Porter. Do you feel we've got time to play this, Liz?
Yes, that's fine if you want.
Simon, can we play this interview, please?
Yeah, unfortunately, David, I couldn't find it on YouTube. I'm just going to switch screens a minute and you can tell me maybe if it's on there. But I have a list of John Crabtree interviews, but...
No, this is the interview of Hughie Porter, Simon.
Yeah, let me just call up the right screen and you can tell me if it's on the right list.
I'm just trying to recall when Birmingham previously had a big celebration. I remember Usain Bolt came. What was that for? That wasn't the Commonwealth Games, was it?
But these are the ones I found, Hugh Porter. So talking about the benefits of cycling.
Yeah.
I followed that link and it just came up. Sorry, this is not available.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Not to worry then. Well, Hughie was 4 times world pursuit champion on the track. We've been good friends for many years. He was also gold medalist in the 1966 Commonwealth Games in Jamaica. And he went on ITV the day we handed the petition to the leader of the council, Ian Ward. We went back to Manor Abbey in Hellzone, where we've got a 400-meter track, an outdoor track, and we did an interview, Hughie and myself and somebody called Kinga in the track centre, and it was very sad really to think of a world champion explaining to the public how we never had a velodrome in the West Midlands, and then he had to struggle on an outdoor velodrome, which is fair enough. That's what everybody did in those days. But sad that now the Commonwealth Games have come, there he is, a former world champion, and the track cycling for the Games will be in London. Okay, we'll skip that one then. Can we go to page 18, please, Simon? That's lovely. So this is James Morris, the local MP for Hellzone. Got quite a few MPs to sign this letter, which obviously is not quite readable, but this sort of shows the political support we've got. Another local MP for Stourbridge, Michael Woods. Actually, I think the column on the left talks about what Mike said in the House of Commons about the need for a velodrome. So having the political support is obviously important, and that's where James comes in. Page 25, please, Simon. Lovely. So we conclude that basically we'd like to have a velodrome as a legacy of the Games, maybe no seats, maybe 500 seats, maybe 800 seats. And we think we could possibly do this for around about £6 or £7 million. And that's quite important because a technical review has been commissioned, and when it's published, I'm sure that the technical review commissioned by Sport England will confirm what we said about the costing of the velodrome. Thank you, Simon. Can we go to education, please?
Gosh, you've really put in so much work into that report, just flicking through it.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it's incredible the support we've managed to get. So this is a letter as an indication from Mark Jeffries, Director of Sport for the BCU. So he's basically saying, yes, if we have a velodrome, we would love to use it. Our people will use our students. And if you just go to the next page, please, Simon. So Mark actually put some figures together for track centre use. And that's the sort of commitments we've got. We've got 2 universities. We've got the biggest college in Birmingham. We've got Dudley Invictus Trust, who run 6 schools and try and offer sport to students, sport out of the normal offer to the children. So education is paramount. The idea would be that schools in the West Midlands can say, last week we went to the swimming pool, this week we're going to go to the velodrome. We're going to hop on the minibus, go to the velodrome, and don't worry, all you need is your PT kit. They've got helmets, they've got shoes, they've got bicycles, and those kids would have a fantastic time. So education is really, really important. I don't think we value education for children as much as we should do, but that's another debate. And of course, this is where getting everybody involved, no matter what background, ethnic background, children, I think essentially are not racist. I guess you learn racism as you get older. So I think children, they can work together, learn together, play together. That's the way to get along. And I think that's how racism one day will be overcome. Can we skip to diversity now, Simon, please? Yep, that's lovely. So that's where Sam comes in. Because of the campaign for the velodrome, I met Sam. Sam is trying to get a cycle hub. He's actually got the cycle hub, getting people on bikes, especially black kids. So no limits to health. It's a non-profit making community interest company, and we're linking up the Major Taylor initiative to this. What we'd like to try and do is get workshops in schools, talks in schools, and maybe even get a play about Major. That would be really, really good if we could do, linked up to the Commonwealth Games. So hopefully we have a good friend called Junior Douglas, a Jamaican gentleman, who's a very, very good playwright, and hopefully we'll get a play off the ground one of these days. Can we go to health now, Simon? Great. So health and disability. I mentioned Tanny. I mentioned people with sight impairments. Health is so important, isn't it? And 2 aspects to it: a healthy lifestyle involving sport and cycling to prevent disease, and then the aspect of rehabilitation for people recovering from illness. I've actually spoken to the Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation or Trust, who said, yes, we would be very interested in the velodrome because we could consider personal health budgets. So that's where that comes in. Right, 105, please, Simon. Wally Fowler. Wally is a dynamo of a man. He comes from Kinver, which is just about 5 miles from Stourbridge. He is at the moment 88 years of age. He's a Masters track champion. And he told me that when he gets to 90, he wants to set another record for 1 hour on the bike. The 1 hour record is the hardest thing you can do on a bicycle. Bradley Wiggins broke the record a few years ago in London. And Wally would like to set a record for 90 years of age. So yeah, you can have youngsters on balance bikes at the bottom of the track, and you can have people like Wally, 90 years of age. So there we go. I think we'll give the final word, page 111, and then we can move on to Major. Okay, Dudley Invictus Trust, 6 schools. So sometimes Rosie Hatton, the director of sport, maybe once a year or twice a year will come to Manor Abbey with 20 children on a minibus. And this is what those children said to their teacher. I have never been to a velodrome as they are too far away. With the Commonwealth Games, it would be embarrassing not to. She obviously saying not to have a velodrome. we want the Black Country to have all facilities. We have a 50-metre pool, so why not a velodrome? And the final one, a velodrome would mean the world to me and my family. We have been to the one in Manchester a long time ago. Now, when I read that email which Rosie sent to me, I was sitting at the breakfast table and Wendy was in the kitchen. And when I read those words, I had a tear in my eye, because that sums up the situation, those young children. So that's the final word. And basically, that's our campaign in a nutshell. So thank you, Simon. So now we get on to the real important bit, Major Taylor. Are we doing okay for time, Liz?
Yes, we're fine.
Oh, great. You're very kind. So Major Taylor, not many people in the UK know Major Taylor. I'd be very interested in how many people watching today have ever heard of Major. As I said before, I knew the name as a cyclist, and I was drawn to him because reflecting on how the sport was 120 years ago, I find that really, really interesting. So I researched Major, and here we go. A good-looking young man in his heyday with a superb physique. He really was a talented rider. So it's not just a case that Major was a black man on a bicycle, which is rather unusual. Major was a star as a cyclist. And that's what drew me to research Major. Born in 1878, his grandfather was a slave. His father worked for a wealthy white family in Indianapolis as a coachman. So young Marshall went to work with Dad and met the family and met the young son, Daniel, and became firm friends with Danny. I think one of the most poignant parts of the story, which I touch upon in the article, is when Danny and his mates, all of them white, all of them from well-to-do families, apart from Marshall, from a very low-income family, go to the local YMCA. Now, I guess he would have been 10, 11, 12. And of course, you can guess what happened. They go along to the YMCA and Marshall was not allowed in because he was black. And I just feel that was such a horrible situation for him to be in. So anyway, the story progresses with the Southard family decided to move to Chicago. And they were so fond of Major, they said to Mum and Dad, we're going to move to Chicago and we'd love Marshall to come and live with us. We can give Marshall the education and the opportunities which you can't. So yeah, we'd love to have him along. I think it was Mum who said, well, thank you very much indeed. Marshall's our boy and we'd rather he stays at home. So the Southards moved away, and of course Marshall's left on his own basically. But before the family moved to Chicago, Danny ensured that Marshall was given a bicycle. And I must say, I'm not quite sure whether the bicycle was given to Marshall before the family left. But in any event, Marshall loved it and actually ended up working, I would guess, part-time for a local bicycle shop owner, Mr. Hay, who had Marshall doing stunts. I suppose the equivalent now would be a boy or girl on a BMX bike wearing a t-shirt and having a great time. So I would guess that Marshall was very, very skilled. And the idea was, because cycling was a boom, It was massively popular, and this is a way to get people into the shop by seeing Marshall do stunts. And then the story goes along that Mr. Hay said to Marshall, right, we've got a bicycle race coming up to basically, I think, to promote the store, a 10-mile cycle race. And by this time, Marshall's been given the nickname Major, because when he did his stunts, he was doing it wearing an old army tunic. And that's where the name Major comes into play. So anyway, Major, we'll call him Major from now on, was a bit apprehensive about racing. I think he was only about 12 or 13 years of age. And he really didn't want to do it. But Mr. Hayes said, well, look, if you just start the race, do a mile or so, and then you can peel off, and that's fine. At least we've got the shop name up in lights. Anyway, there's a lovely part of the story where in his book, Major describes how he had tears in his eyes and the gun was fired and he was off. Now, what some people don't say is it was actually a handicap event. But the bottom line is that Major raced his heart out. He obviously, as a youngster, had natural talent. And would you believe he actually won the race? He crossed the line a few seconds in front of the second rider and basically collapsed. And I've been in that situation. Every bike rider probably knows how Major must have felt, totally exhausted. But I can tell you now, as a former amateur cyclist, there's nothing on earth like winning a bicycle race. It's the most wonderful feeling you can ever have. And I guess every sports person shares the same feeling, whether they're scoring a goal or a try in rugby or cricket or whatever. So that was his first taste of winning a bicycle race. The next part of the story is that a rider called Birdie Munger notices that Major's got an incredible talent, and he takes him under his wing, which I think is fantastic. So all the people who helped Major, essentially, those people were the people who had either the money or the means or the influence to help him. And many of those people were white people. So Birdie Munger was a white chap, took Major under his wing and said, I'm going to make you the world's fastest rider. And actually that's what happened. So we go along now to Montreal in 1899. Major goes to Montreal in front of 18,000 people. He becomes the world champion. So indeed, he is the fastest rider in the world. And so he was the first superstar, because cycling in those days, track cycling, think of Madison Square Garden, the big sporting arena, that was a cycle track. And that's where the term Madison, the cycling event called the Madison, which is essentially a two-rider relay race, a very, very hard event indeed. That's where it comes from, Madison Square Gardens. So, yeah, Major became the fastest rider in the world. Now, there is a film about him, and Liz, you'll like this, because the film was basically made in Australia.
Hey, here with our second episode in this special series of conversations from Shade, supported by Hauser and Worth. In this series, we'll be exploring unencumbered voices.
Thank you.
Okay, Liz?
Yes, I think we're okay now.
Okay, so the film is called Tracks to Glory, and it focuses on the trip that Major made to Australia 4 years after becoming world champion. I think the following year he went to Europe and raced in Paris and all the big tracks in France, went to Germany, to Holland, and made a lot of money. And incredibly, he faced very little racism. In fact, I don't think any racism at all in Europe, which is quite strange. The racism in those days seems to have taken place in America. Anyway, 4 years later from becoming world champion, Major's invited to Australia. A lovely part of the film is where the promoter comes across to see Major, who I think by now he's moved to Worcester, which was much more friendly, much more inviting towards black people, and treated black people much better than other parts. Probably the southern states would be treating black people far worse. But the promoter comes to Major to try and sign him up to get a contract. And the clip in the film shows Major in his church, in the church service, and a promoter saying, Major, I'd like you to come to Australia. And basically Major said, I don't do business on a Sunday. So Major wouldn't race on a Sunday, and he certainly wouldn't do business on a Sunday. Anyway, he ends up going to Australia on a liner. And I think there's a great part in the book where, if I turn my pages, on the trip, he made friends with the purser. And I think Major had a lot of doubt in his mind as to how he would be received in Australia. So he's talking to the purser, and he's on board the RMS Ventura. He's sort of saying to the purser, do you think I'll be let into Australia? They've got the colour bar. And the purser said, look, Major, I'm sure you'll be fine. Anyway, here we go. Pointing over the rail of the steamer, he, the purser, exclaimed, look, look, do you see all those American flags? Do you hear all those whistles and horns? Now do you think you'll be allowed to land in Australia? And I'm quoting from Major's book here. It was the most delightful experience, and a very impressive one too. I shall remember it as long as I live. I could not restrain my tears as I looked over the side of the liner and saw hundreds of boats and all kinds and all sorts, both steam and launches, decked out with the American flags, with their whistles tooting, and men and women aboard them with megaphones greeting me with this salvation. Taylor, Taylor, welcome, Major Taylor. My friend the purser was as pleased with this royal welcome accorded to me as my wife and I were. I told him I felt sure I was going to love Australia. Now, I think that captures the essence of how Major was received in Australia. And I think it's incredible when you feel how maybe the Aboriginal people were not so well treated years ago, but here we have an athlete welcomed by the Australians, and by and large, very, very little racism shown. There would have been pockets of it, but anyway, the trip to Australia was tremendously successful. By now, Major is earning very, very good money, and he won a lot of money in Australia, and was very, very well received. He rode on the cycle track at Sydney cricket ground, and I think it was floodlit, and there would have been around about 30,000 people watching. So yeah, cycling was a big, big sport, and what a great reception was given by the Aussies, and I think that's a great tribute to the country. So Liz, how are we doing for time now?
We're okay. Perhaps it'd be nice if people can ask a few questions. But
Can I just perhaps finish off? Can I just make this one final piece of information? In one event that Major rode in an event on the track in Sydney. The purse for the event was $5,000. So 118 years later, that would translate to be £167,000. Oh, sorry, $167,000, I think. But in any event, a lot of money. So that's the sort of money Major was riding for. But the interesting bit was, and I haven't mentioned the problems he encountered on the track. So he would have been racing in bunched events, maybe half a mile, a quarter mile, half a mile, 1 mile. And it's not like having 2 riders on the track at the same time, where essentially you can have a fair race. If you have a number of riders, unfortunately, this is when riders conspire and can form a combine against a certain rider. And that's what happens. So very often, Major would be ganged up upon and would be put in what they call, or what he termed, a pocket. And a pocket is where you're basically hemmed in by the other riders or prearranged, so the favourite can go off and win the race, whilst the better man or the better rider is hemmed in by the opposition. And when this purse of $5,000 was there to be won, Major didn't actually qualify for the final because he was put in a pocket. So I just thought I'd add that, Liz.
Yes.
I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay, well, that's absolutely fascinating. And to think that, you know, if he won his world championship in 1899, then he must have been over in Australia, maybe even if it was 5-10 years later in the beginning of 1900s. Well, the White Australia policy actually lasted till 1966. So that's remarkable that he got such a wonderful welcome. And but it's well, I suppose all sports have got ways of causing problems, but I didn't like the story of the pockets, though. Right, okay then. Well, we just have to welcome 2 more guests with us. We've got Marcia and Dunkley from Black History Walks, and Michael O'Arger. Thank you. Good to have you both with us. So has anybody got any questions or comments about this amazing man, Marshall Major Taylor, and the remarkable efforts that David Viner and colleagues are making to have a velodrome in Birmingham? It won't be ready in time for the Commonwealth Games, will it though?
No, 4 years ago, Liz, the original idea was to try and get a velodrome in time for the games. And it's a long story, but there was misinformation and so on. It became obvious we wouldn't get a competition velodrome with 4,000 seats. So now the ambition is to have a legacy of the games. As I said before, maybe no seats, or we could have 500 seats or 800 seats.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Well, that's great. A legacy would be really wonderful, and that's something to work towards. Simon's just put a message for all of us to say that the wind's so strong there in Nottingham now that if the session disappears, it means his power is down. And so, sort of great story. So Simon published this in the bylines, didn't he? Marcia, over to you.
Yes, hello, sorry, the same problem here. It took me half an hour to get in because the wind, I thought the window was going to come in at one point, so that's sorry about that. But absolutely amazing this is about Major Taylor. And I'd just like to ask, is this specifically for the Commonwealth Games, this, you know, in terms of, will they actually announce that this velodrome is in honour of Major Taylor? Will there be that connection? Will that be made?
Well, that's a great idea. And you know, sometimes when I dream, I think, if we get the velodrome, wouldn't it be fantastic to have it called the Major Taylor Velodrome? I would love it. I think that would be fantastic. And I think it would be really, really meaningful and would excite everybody and bring the communities together. I'm just a humble campaigner. And yeah, I was certainly, if we do get the velodrome, that's one idea I've always felt I would like to go along with, definitely.
That's an amazing idea. And it's interesting because one of the things, David, we've been talking about and hearing about is, you know, places where statues have been taken down that are inappropriate, that street names are being changed that are inappropriate. So we've got to start replacing with positive imagery and positive stories. And this is such a remarkable story. So I think I missed the bit where, explain to me how you knew about Major Taylor. How did you become so interested in his story?
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz. I think the name Major Taylor would probably would have appeared very, very occasionally in the cycling magazine, maybe. So I knew the name, but I didn't really understand who Major was. And it was when the velodrome campaign and that issue came to the forefront of my mind, and I thought I need to know more about this Major. Who was he? So I looked at Major as a bike rider and looking at what a superb athlete he was, how clever, how intelligent, how he had the right food, the right diet, the right training. All these things come together. You have to have the talent, but you have to have the determination. You know, Major always pushed for what he would term a square deal, a square deal. So, yeah, I looked at Major, and then I think I probably would have seen the Hennessy advert, and that really captured my imagination. And then you go on and on. And there was a book written by a journalist from the Washington Post. I can't remember the guy's name. It's a lovely book, and if you look at the websites, I think it's called The World's Fastest Rider. Anyway, I said to Wendy, I've decided what I want for Christmas. And Wendy bought the book for me. And that is an incredible book. Since then, I don't know if I can hold this up.
Yeah.
That is the autobiography of Major. It's a fascinating book. And what Major does what he does tend to do, Liz, is to quote from the local newspaper reports. So a lot of the descriptions are quoted from the press at the time, but it's wonderful to read from his own words. So that's how it started. And the incredible thing is, I spoke to so many different people, cyclists. Have you ever heard the name Major Taylor? Especially when I spoke to Black people, whether they were cyclists or not. And so many people said, no. Who's Major Taylor? I think in America, in cycling circles, the name Major Taylor is well respected. And Lynn and her colleagues over in Worcester with the Major Taylor Foundation, which incidentally we've affiliated to. We're the first non-American organization, the Major Taylor Initiative, to affiliate to the foundation. I think in those, the cycle clubs and the cycling community, they really love Major Taylor bicycle clubs, the kits, and all the rest. It's the UK, and I think it's out of America. I'd be very interested, Liz, to know what profile Major has in Australia, because track cycling, you've got some very good riders in Australia. Track cycling has always been big. And actually, the sort of racing that Major was doing, some of the events were handicapped. And that's what has always been prominent in Aussie cycling, handicap races, whether on the road or the track. But I'd be fascinated to know, do they remember the trip?
I'll do that research for you, but over to you, Michael. You've got a point you want to raise.
First, sorry about that sound. That was very embarrassing. I get frustrated when people do that on my broadcast. Dave, that was really interesting talking you there. I'd never heard of this character, Major.
No.
Yeah? And I'm challenged here. I'm going to be up frank. You know, legacy. You know, as I think about what you presented, what you talked about the man. What was his legacy? And then I kind of move into other sports like swimming, which are normally technical sports, and then even being right up today with the ice Olympics, what do they call the Olympics in
The Winter Olympics.
Winter Olympics. Thank you. It's just my old brain. These technical sports, and there seems to be an absence of Black people, just individuals, and then no legacy, which seems really strange. Was he aware that he was the only Black guy there and he had to do something for the others, or just for himself?
That's a great question. I think essentially track cycling and cycling was a white person's hobby and sport. It was tremendously popular in the 1800s, but very expensive.
Yeah.
Now, there were Black riders, and they would tend to ride together. And I think there was a great demarcation. So Major was one of the very few, and I don't know of any other Black riders, to take on the top riders who were white, basically. It was a white person's sport in those days. And at that level, he had the guts, determination, and the talent to take them on. And I think the great thing is a lot of people, decent people, helped Major. The Southard family. Danny, what a star Danny was. Birdie Munger, what a star he was. Some promoters would welcome Major. He was good for box office. Some promoters didn't want to know. And the film I mentioned, Tracks to Glory, which I've lent to my friend Junior Douglas, because I'd love him to write a play. But you can go onto the website and you can get the start of the film where they're on a train going to, well, Major's on his way with his wife to a track meet. The train stops as a mechanical. Major wearing a suit, good-looking chap who played Major, but Major was a good-looking person, gets off the train and says to the driver, you know, how long are we going to be, basically? I've got a race to go to. And of course, the white man who was the train driver, because Black people didn't drive trains, looked down on him and basically said, effectively, when I'm ready, boy, when I'm ready. That's not a quote, but that's the gist of it. So this is the artistic license. Major goes back to the Vanguard, said to the guard, can I have Major Taylor's bike, please? Or can I have my bike? And the guardsman said, this is Major Taylor's bike. So of course he said, I am Major Taylor. Gets on the bike. At the same time, the train starts up again and they have a bit of a race. That's the opening sequence, and you can see that on YouTube.
Look out there. Just one subsequent question. Putting race aside, the Black man and a predominantly white sport, what part do you think money played? Like, as you said, bicycle cycling was expensive. Was it almost as equal, or was cycling popular among everybody, or just the middle class elite could afford it?
It was popular in those days by aristocratic people and coming down to the middle class people, basically wealthy people. Yeah. So poor people would no way would they be able to access a bicycle. I don't think it was until maybe the motor car came into play in the early 1900s, and then cycles became more affordable. And of course, over the time, cycling became a working man's sport because working men and women went to work on a bicycle. And I think as life went on, eventually the bicycle became something you didn't do if you were successful. You'd have a motor car, you'd aspire to a motor car. So in the 1960s and 70s, the decline of the bicycle probably around the world because of the car. Now, ironically, things go around in bicycles or cycles, and now cycling has become again a middle class occupation and sport. Bicycles, carbon bicycles, can cost £10,000, £12,000. £5,000 is very, very common. But for kids, white kids and black kids and kids of any background living in the West Midlands and Birmingham, the official line is, and the official line came from the Birmingham Cycling Facilities Needs Analysis, stated about the velodrome: there is existing provision for the people of the West Midlands in the form of Derby and Newport. Now, I live in Stourbridge, and Newport is 95 miles for me, and for Wally from Kinver. I would much rather go to Newport, virtually a 200-mile trip, than go to Derby, because Derby you have to go from Stourbridge through the Black Country, through Warsaw to get there, and it's not very accessible. So what chance have young people got, no matter what colour? What if those kids, they're not going to get the chance to ride on a decent facility. Jason Kenny, in his book, and it's in the document, but Jason Kenny said basically what an accident it was. He became a track cyclist, but only because he lived very close to Manchester Velodrome. His dad never had the opportunity, and he said his dad could have been a good champion. And how many people were missed because of the lack of a velodrome? And this applies across the board. I feel it's so important that access to sport should be for everybody. Okay, so swimming pools are a great demonstration how kiddies can be taken to the swimming pool, hopefully relatively low cost, but they haven't got any chance of going to a lot of venues. And it's not just cycling, there are other sports where the same situation happens. People living in Worcester, UK, Liz.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me, to get to the decent swimming pool, we have to go to Coventry, because we want a 50-metre pool for the people to race in.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Can I just cut back to Michael? Michael, explain your interest to us and introduce yourself, please.
Well, I've just got a passion for Black British history. I've been very honest with you, just Black British history, in the sense that the connections, the fact that, you know, there's so many ways that Black people have played a part in British history. I'm just celebrating and recognizing. And look, the more obscure, the better, because then people get shocked to find that Black people doing this in the 17th century, 18th century, whatever. That sense of, okay, there weren't thousands, but they were there, they were normalized, almost kind of normalized the Black presence. That's my interest. Now, but to be honest with you, cycling, I always, with respect, David, I always see it in the elitist events, black or white. You know, the kind of stuff you're riding around on, all the gear that you wear, come on, it's all, you know, it's like, but can I say this? My partner wants an electric bike, and you look at the price of these things, and you think it's for, anyway, so it's not for the ordinary people. That's what I find it quite
Michael, you've hit the nail on the head. This is why it's so important. I want all kids. Now, on Sunday, last Sunday, I went to Shrewsbury, which from here is about 40 miles in Shropshire. And they've got a climbing wall facility, a building, a bit like a B&Q type of store, a basic premises with a climbing wall probably 40 feet high. Now, here's the rub. I saw a minibus with Tetton Hall College on the side. The teacher, James, had taken 8 of his pupils from Wolverhampton to the climbing wall in Shrewsbury because he hasn't got one to go to locally. But those kids go to a very nice middle-class school. They're very lucky to have a committed and dedicated teacher. 95% of children don't have that. And incidentally, why is it that you see so many fantastic black footballers, certainly UK, and also the athletes, short distance especially, there were some superb black athletes, and boxing. I think it's because low cost. A friend of mine, Kevin, was a discus competitor, went to 2 Commonwealth Games. He represented Jamaica on the one occasion, and England in 2002 at the discus. And Kev said to me, he'd spoken to his friends like Linford Christie and other people, why didn't you do cycling? And they all said, we couldn't afford a bike. We couldn't afford a pair of cycling shoes. And actually, in my day, when I was racing, there were 4 outdoor tracks: Manor Abbey, Wolverhampton, Salford Park, which is Spaghetti Junction, Birmingham, and there was a track in Coventry. It was an outdoor sport. And now there's only 2 outdoor tracks in the West Midlands. But essentially, you could race locally. But of course, now track cycling is indoors on carbon bikes. And in our case, in the West Midlands, so far to travel, that's what makes it an elitist sport. And I want it not to be an elitist sport. I want everybody to be, you've got to see it to do it. And that's why major is so important. And other black riders, the more people see and identify that cycling is a sport that welcomes everybody, no matter men and women, boys and girls, whatever ethnic background, it's so, so important. You do a sport with passion. It's a shared experience, whatever the sport is. And that's what bonds people together. That's what brings societies together and communities.
No, Dave, you're on the money there. You're on the money. I'd put it to you. I'd add to that the fact that as it increasingly becomes for want of a better word, a black middle class, you'll see access into these money sports, into skiing, into swimming, where they'll put the money in. Whereas the low-hanging fruit, the low cost, as you mentioned, the football and boxing, they're relatively easy. The expense, there's no the capital cost is quite modest.
Yeah,
there are boots, but the capital cost in terms of a bike or set of skis or a skiing holiday. But these things are happening now. There are use one of a better expression, middle class black people who are doing these things. And I know, I always find it difficult to say these things, but I know my own family, some of them are taking their children on climbing walls.
Yeah.
I think I didn't even know what a climbing wall was.
No.
These are young kids, so they're starting, 5 years old on climbing, so who knows where they'll go. And that's how it starts.
Absolutely.
They're going these are weekend climbing walling. So who knows?
That's just amazing. And David, I've just sorry, Michael first. Michael, I've just Googled and lost my page here, but I understand that you've got your background is you're a cultural historian in London.
Enough. No,
Enough. So, Michael, I do hope that you will join us again on another occasion to tell us perhaps about some of the things you do, because I loved your expression where you said the more obscure the better. And I think some of the subjects we've managed to bring speakers to talk about have been quite obscure in some cases. But sport, I can't think. Simon, David, can you think in the last 50 sessions? I don't think we've talked about sport before. So really what you've done, David, is to bring something to us, which you said...
We've talked about football, Liz.
Oh, yes, we have.
We've talked about Andrew Watson.
Yes, how could I forget football, David? Thank you. But this is just so interesting. Now, you said David, right back at the beginning, you said that really you were so shocked by George Floyd's murder that, you know, we saw the recording again and again, and that reaction and the Black Lives Matter reaction, I think, has shaken everybody up around the world to think, well, perhaps not everybody, but a whole lot of people, to think about how we can address this in whatever context or possibility we have. And here's you in the context of cycle racing, to think of this as something that's a really important story to tell. And as you're doing all the wonderful work for the communities and all across our communities and our wonderful Midlands communities, to have a velodrome, then you're also including this story as well, which I just think is brilliant. Do you want to come back on that, Michael?
Me? No, I think this is fantastic. It's all about making connections, bringing people in. And, you know, because as I say, I urge people to get involved in Black history, but my fellow Black people get involved in Black history and find their way in. Because there's a Black person. It may not be great, but it will be there one time, and it can be quite exciting. And so, because you mentioned Black Lives Matter, of course they do, but all lives matter in the sense that we matter as human beings. You know, to one another, and we celebrate, acknowledge, and I'm going to use the L word here. We love one another. How we manifest that love, you know, is different. So, you know, blokes don't hug people, but you get involved in the community. I just okay, guys, I've got a small rant, because Carol, I know you've had your hand and wanted to say something. Just a very small rant. I sometimes respond to people who make racist comments on my posts. I sometimes go in dialogue, but you're not going to win the dialogue. You're never going to win the argument, because all I tell them, go and talk to Black people. Go and, you know, they're very angry about this. No Black presidents here. This is all people the bull and all this nonsense. We'll say, well, go and talk to the Black person. Ask them how they see themselves in history. They're talking, and it's that in that conversation. That's what Michelle Obama talks about, talking. You know, and people talking to each other, considering each other. You know, because I was brought up in Liverpool, where it was a community, and we respected back into this is proper old school, where you respected one another, and you looked out for each other. I know those values have changed now with the internet and much more dispersed community, but nonetheless, those values exist in this individual. We should do, you know, what you're doing, David. You're just making connections and having a bit of fun. Sorry, rant over.
No, that's this is what we're here for. I could see, yeah. Caroline.
I just wanted to say to David, he was talking about tandem racing for people with visual impairments. And it reminded me that my husband used to do tandem triathlons when we lived in Northamptonshire, and he and his cycling partner, because my husband's totally blind, they won the fastest blind team 2 years running.
Wow.
I don't know whether
that's fantastic.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
They used to hire the tandem, or borrow the tandem from the Northamptonshire Society for the Blind, so there was no
Fantastic.
cost involved.
That's great. And, you know, I have a friend in Stourbridge called Nick. He's a little bit younger than me. I think Nick's late, I'm 69. I think Nick's about late 50s. He used to race tandems at Newport Velodrome. And he said, you know what? Then we were shunted off to Manchester. We were told, we don't want you at Newport. You're going to have to race and train at Manchester. And that's totally so bad to hear, isn't it? How people can be treated in such a fashion. But I got invited by Nick to pilot him on his tandem, on his road bike. And we rode from his house on the outskirts of Stourbridge to Manor Abbey. And what an experience and what a responsibility to be on the front of a tandem with somebody with sight impairment. It was, but you know, we got to the track and we did some laps of the track, and Nick was pushing. And I thought, my gosh, I can't, you know, I can't really sustain this effort. But I know it meant so much to him. And I just wish I could go out with Nick every day of the week. I just can't imagine. And Simon, are you still there? Simon?
I am still here, yes.
I wonder if you could try and, if we got time, can we try and find the page? It's under health and disability.
Yeah.
Where there's a page relating to Helen Scott on the tandem.
Yeah.
And you'll see the comment I made on that page.
Let me.
And I'm just showing you the picture of the book on Major Taylor in Australia. There's loads on
Oh, it's lovely. That's lovely.
So it's obviously a well recognised story. And while you're looking for that, Simon, I'm just going to tell you the story of Spicy Fingers. I don't know if any of you know Spicy Fingers. He's a wonderful Jamaican chef, poet, and general ne'er-do-well, I'd say. A lovely, lovely character. And he decided, all the best then, David. I see you're getting on your way now. And Spicy Fingers decided he was going to do the Land's End to John O'Groats bike ride. And I've never been to John O'Groats. So I said, well, I'll come as your support car. So I didn't do the whole lot, but I did get to John O'Groats with him and congratulated him. So he's Jamaican. So good on Spicy Fingers for that riding, but it was a bit of an issue getting a good enough bike for him, but we got there in the end.
Fantastic.
Good. Okay, lovely. So Simon, how are you doing with this?
This the one, David?
Let's have a look at this.
Yeah, that's the one, Simon. Brilliant job. Imagine what courage it takes as a rider with sight impairment to race around a velodrome at 40 miles an hour plus on the back of a tandem bike fitted with a fixed wheel and no brakes. Sophie Thornhill, MBE, double world champion and double gold medal winner, Commonwealth Games paracycling. We salute you along with all paracyclists and disabled sportsmen and women. Yeah, I think I just can't imagine personally as a bike rider,
yeah.
the guts, because I'll tell you now, when I've ridden at Newport, 42 degrees is an awesome angle on the banks. And
don't get too technical now. Don't get too technical.
No.
We need to invite you back, David, to see how we get on. So can I just rather cheekily say thank you very, very much indeed. We're just going to have a quick whistle stop through a PowerPoint of catching up on things now, if that's all right with folks. It's lovely to have had the opportunity to hear more about Major Taylor, and that was the PowerPoint that I did with a little bit more information. But it'll be really interesting to see if we can make this link with the Major Taylor Association and Worcester, and see if our colleagues in Worcester, in Worcestershire, then take on the story of Major Taylor as part of their Black History stories and their links with Worcester. So following up on past sessions, we've heard about the issues and challenges facing Professor Sir Jeff Palmer in Edinburgh to do with the Henry Dundas statue and the work that they're doing there. So just to say, there's lots of information obviously about this, and I've put a little bit of information here. And also Stephen Mullen has written a really good article, long article in the Scottish Historical Review on Henry Dundas, the great delayer and of the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. This has then introduced to me a whole nother area to look at, and this is about the pro-slavers. Now, this is a term, it's like an oxymoron, that can make sense. Who would be a pro-slaver? But it's the people who fought the abolitionists. So we're used to hearing stories about the successes of abolitionists to eventually stop the slave trade. But to look at things about pro-slavers is interesting. So I've been trying to find out a bit more about that. And Paula E. Dumas, so I was going to ask David, but he's had to leave us. She received her PhD from Edinburgh University, and her PhD was on pro-slavery. And she's written a book on pro-slavery Britain, and without spending a whole lot of money to be able to buy one, I've managed to read up quite a few bits and pieces out of it, and it's really, really interesting that this perhaps is a subject that we need to find out more about, as well as abolitionists. And this was all the stuff off the back cover, so lots of interest there. Then following up that we've been doing stuff about Ireland, because we're looking at Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England, as well as the rest of the world that Britain colonised. And so the reason I've included this one here is that there's an article here in the Irish Times, a furore after an academic makes the case for colonialism. And this wasn't so long ago, so it was a bit surprising. So there's some really interesting information and pushback information where people are saying, well, no, well, like the British government, you know, this isn't what we want. So what's coming up in Black History that I've found out about? Well, I thought this was really wonderful. This is a proclamation on National Black History Month 2022, which is February in the US and other parts of the world. And this is from Joe Biden, President of the United States, and he calls upon public officials, educators, librarians, and all the people of the United States to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Just say it, Joe Biden. Really good, I thought. So just imagine Boris Johnson saying this, right? Okay, but we might get it in Wales. They're quite proactive. I think I'll send a copy of that slide to the Senedd in Cardiff. Right, now next week on the 19th, Saturday, tomorrow, in fact I say tomorrow. What day is it today? Tomorrow, there's the launch of Sankofa Children's Stories website. And Bunmi Aisan came and joined us last week and told us about this, and she's going to come next week and tell us even more about it. So to showcase her Sankofa Children's Stories website, but I have to say her Sankofa Black History website has gone from strength to strength over the last few months when I haven't been following up stories, and some really interesting information on there. So it'd be good to get Bunmi to talk about that as well next week. So the launch of Sankofa Children's Stories website, and she's given various times here. Oh, you're all right, 5 p.m. GMT. I'm not sure what time that is for me. 5 p.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. I don't think so. Right, okay, I'll watch the so that's Saturday the 19th, 5 o'clock. You can watch that live. Sounds really good. Also, there's something coming up. S.I. Martin is going to speak on the beliefs of Black Georgians. This sounds absolutely fascinating. This is Wednesday the 16th of March, and that's the Humanists UK are putting that on. And he's talking about the history of the African diaspora in Britain is often considered simplistically within the story of Christianity in the UK, but this denies the complexity and depth of religion, belief and non-belief of Black people in British history. So he also, a bit further down, look at different stories, including anti-slavery campaigners like Jamaican-born Robert Wedderburn. We've spoken of him before. So fascinating, really good. You can call out at any stage during this because I can't actually see who's on the screen. Now, Marcia, you introduced me a couple of weeks ago to the World Reimagined. This is absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Really brilliant project. And the host cities to date are Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Leicester, Liverpool City Region, London, Swansea. So that's really fascinating. Have you done any more with this?
Yes, so I've got a meeting with them next week. I can't remember the date, where we are now approaching, we're moving up to the United Kingdom. So they've asked me to be their lead for the Black Country schools. So I'm approaching a lot of schools next week to basically take on this pilot. Yes.
Excellent and wonderful, Marcia. All right, now commodities. This is for you, Marcia. Chocolate and sugar. Now, Marcia's doing some work with a well-known chocolate company that we won't mention.
Right.
I found this wonderful Black history course,
Okay.
Marcia. It's a course, it's a WordPress document, a blog, and the students who are on the African American Studies 119X Chocolate, Culture and the Politics of Food course at Harvard University in 2013, 14 and 15. Their articles are written and essays are written as posts and published on this site. It's absolutely great. It's so great. After we finish the recording, I'll share a little bit more about this with you. Also, Stephen Mullen, who I spoke about earlier in Glasgow, Edinburgh, he's publishing a book on the Glasgow sugar aristocracy, Scotland and Caribbean slavery, later this year. Another sugar, this is sugar, another commodity, because I think that to get people to take an interest sometimes in Black history, you need to come from different points of view. Then I discovered that the University of Highlands and Islands, their Centre for History, there's a lot of blogs, a lot of podcasts there and film things. And there's this one on sugar slave owning in the Highlands before 1707. That was really interesting. And then other podcasts to explore, well, this is just absolutely brilliant. Apple podcasts I have discovered. And they, like us, have responded, but very professionally, have responded with a whole range of interesting stories that they've picked up and that they're promoting. So on February the 22nd, this one will be live. All the past ones are there logged. The origin stories about before 400 odd years of triangular trade, the plantations of whips, whatever. So that sounds interesting. But what I discovered was that there are two podcasts about the Welsh Plains wool story, which Caroline and I led the National Lottery funded project on that in 2019. And this lovely lady, Moya, who I've invited to come and join us and tell us about these podcasts that she's doing. She managed to do two podcasts with even any reference whatsoever to the major project that we ran, but colleagues were speaking on it, Dr. Marion Gwynn and a colleague called Jenny Hodgman, but it's really good. And the other ones, there's some smashing ones there. I think there's one on chocolate as well. I'm sure there's one on chocolate. Pirates, I've just got a personal interest in pirates. So this one's another one from the University of the Highlands and Islands. But to say that, interestingly, the African Centre for the Study of the United States has also got various things that you can watch and listen to now as they develop their portfolio. And then Black history here in Australia. Okay, well, I looked this week at the evidence produced of an inquiry. It's called the Coranderrk Inquiry, which was in 1881, the only occasion in the history of the 19th century when an official commission was appointed to address Aboriginal people's call for land and self-determination. Because it's no joke when I I start the sessions and speak of the peoples here to have been dispossessed of their lands almost in entirety, and only now are some lands being given back, but shows that way back in 1881 there were some efforts. And it's fascinating to see what the outcomes were, but then time went by. Right, and then I make notes as I'm going along and add things for next time. So I've added a few bits there that might be of interest to folks, but I don't know if anybody's got anything else you want to add.
Yeah, sorry, Liz, because I couldn't write as quickly as I wanted to. So there was specific ones there to do with sugar and chocolate. Are you? Can I talk to you afterwards or get the link?
Yeah, we'll after we finish the recording, we can.
Okay. God
Any
bless.
of the detail of it all then.
Thank
All
you.
right then, so David, thank you so much again. Michael, it's been great to have you join us, and I hope you're going to join us again. We'll finish the recording and then we can carry on chatting, and it's great to have Pauline with us too, and my other colleagues. All right, thanks very much to you all, and thanks as ever, Simon.